Don't die with your music still in you. Quote, Dr. Wayne Dyer. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. A cluster of 3 dwellings, a cottage, a house and a farm. On a country lane, nothing else for miles. Our neighbours were pensioners. Not obvious playmates for a 9-year-old girl, but they were all I had. And they had a dog, a mongrel named Butch, who was my only friend. So I used any excuse possible to head around to their farm to see them. A low grey stone building with a blue front door leading straight into the living room. To the left, a door that was always closed. Straight ahead, an open doorway, 2 stone steps down to a kitchen, the tiniest kitchen you've ever seen. And that's where they spent most of their time. I was drawn to the closed door. I was intrigued to know what was behind it. Every time I entered that farm, I looked to the left, hoping that door might be lying open. It never was. At school, we were learning to play the recorder. Everyone else had the standard black and cream instruments. I'd managed to find a bright red one. I was a misfit, even then. I took to it quickly, learnt to read music. Those little black dots and sticks just danced off the page right at me. But I wanted more. I wanted to learn to play the piano. Just one small problem. We didn't have a piano. And pianos are expensive. I lamented this fact as I sat in that tiny kitchen with Mr. and Mrs. Sutton. Slowly, Mr. Sutton got out of his chair, beckoned me to follow him as he shuffled across the wooden floor to that door and opened it. A secret piano standing against the wall of the dining room. And wow, it looked old. I learnt to play the piano when I was 9. At first I used the neighbour's piano, the old piano in that tiny little used dining room, the secret piano. Then I think my parents realised that my constant presence at the farmhouse might be a bit of an imposition on the kind farmer and his wife. But they also thought I'd get bored quickly, ADHD. And so they bought me the cheapest second-hand piano they could find. It cost 50 quid. They promised that if I stuck with it, they'd buy a better one. My piano was so old, it couldn't even be tuned properly. The piano tuner said to me that if he tightened the strings enough for it to play on key, the strings would snap. So certain of the notes were always slightly off key. No matter how much I practiced, no matter how perfectly I played the piece, it would still come out sounding a bit different, not quite right. A couple of the keys caused such strong vibrations, they shook the whole frame. And I was terrified it was going to shatter the glass fruit bowl that was sitting on top of it. My piano stood in a corner of the living room, waiting patiently for me to get home from school each night. I'd open the creaky lid and let my mood dictate what tune I played, what story I told with those notes. My piano stood in the corner of the living room. I loved it and yet I couldn't wait for it to be gone, to be replaced by a better one. My piano stood in a corner of the living room, absorbing the sadness as my mum told me my dad had left. We moved to a smaller house. The piano squeezed into the tiny dining room. And I realised there would be no better piano. The stories of my childhood would play out on these keys, always slightly out of tune. A metaphor for my neurodivergent brain. Everyone has a signature tune, a party piece, a song you've played over and over, fingers dancing over the keys again and again until it becomes second nature. You can play it in your sleep. I probably did. My signature tune was Scott Joplin's The Entertainer. I loved the way my hands had to bounce around to play it. The Entertainer, my party piece, designed to entertain people. Except I didn't play at parties. I didn't entertain anyone with it. I wanted to share the music, bring joy to people through the bright melody. But rejection sensitivity meant I thought I'd ruin the joy if I didn't play every single note perfectly. People would judge me as a failure. And with the ingrained knowledge that everything I'd played to date had been slightly off key, I decided it was safer to keep the music inside me, not share it with anyone. My secret piano. A quote I came across recently said, "You're not responsible for the version of you other people see." And at first I thought, hell yeah, people can be so judgmental. But then I pondered it more deeply. You're not responsible for the version of you other people see. Is that true? People have a perception that I'm supremely confident. Even my mum and my oldest friends, when asked for 3 words to describe me, all chose confident as the top one. That was the appearance I was giving. Outwardly successful. Senior roles in professional services firm, flying off around the world, leading teams on high pressure corporate finance transactions. Fearless, leading the way. It was all an illusion. A tune I was playing based on my perception of what a capable person would do and say. I'd bought the sheet music to Competent Human, the musical, and I was playing every note perfectly. That was the version of me I was letting other people see. Behind this loud, confident persona, I've lived my life in relative silence. I've always struggled to share my creativity. My head is full of thoughts. I never stop thinking. But I struggle to get these thoughts out on paper. Always feeling that what I have to say won't be of any interest to anyone else. Hours spent scrolling social media told me that everything I want to talk about, there are so many people out there saying it already, and they're saying it so much better than me. So I have a library of blog posts fully written in my mind that never make it onto anyone else's screen. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, just like playing the piano in public. Earlier this year, I decided to try journaling as a way to build up my confidence with creative writing. but I didn't know how to journal. So I joined a journaling club, the Sunday morning journaling club. Bet you can't guess when it happens. The coach explained that a journal can be anything you want it to be. Long form text, bullet points, a photograph, a drawing, a poem, whatever you want. When I saw the word poem, I had an almost visceral reaction. A poem, don't be ridiculous. I've never written a poem in my life. When it was time to write, she put on some background music. It was a solo pianist. The album name, The Secret Piano. This piano music touched my soul and freed up my creativity. Out of nowhere, I found myself writing a poem. And I've written several more since. People sometimes ask, are you musical? What does this really mean? As I'm autistic, I've always taken this question very literally, saying, yes, I'm a little musical, I play the piano a bit. It's been 40 years since I learnt to play the piano. And for a lot of that time, I didn't have an actual piano available. But the secret piano has been with me throughout, even without me recognising it. I have music playing on repeat in my head. It calms me, it soothes me. And now it's granting me permission to explore my creative side. I've spent far too long worrying about the version of me other people see. And in doing so, I've been hiding within myself. Don't die with your music still in you. That quote really struck me. I set up a Substack profile and published my poems. If lots of people read it and enjoy it, that's great. If lots of people read it and hate it, that's okay too. And if no one reads it, that's still okay. Through publishing my poems and creative writing and speaking in public about my experiences, I'm finally giving people the opportunity to see the authentic me. What you choose to do with that, what version of me you create in your minds, that's not for me to say. Whether you feel my words land perfectly or they're slightly off-key, I'm playing my signature tune the only way I know how, and that's enough for me. Perhaps one day I'll even play the piano for you. Thank you.
Thank you.